Today we are going to talk about a commander from Magic's latest set, Aetherdrift. This time our commander is Kolodin, Triumph Caster. This is a Boros commander that is focused on vehicles and mounts. For our build we decided to focus more on the vehicle aspect, as we found this to have more support overall. Following the new commander brackets that are under the beta at this moment, this deck would fall under bracket 2 core. As following Wizards of the Coast statement, this deck is tuned for big splashy turns and strong enemies. It's built with a team, and he doesn't have any game changer card or combo in this deck, as well as barely any tutors, but more on that later on. For now, let's talk about our commander. Kolodin is a 2-mana Boros commander with the following texts. Mounts and vehicles you control have hastes. Whenever a mount you control enters, it becomes saddled until end of turn. Whenever a vehicle you control enters, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. For a 2-mana commander, this ability seemed very strong. Like we mentioned before, we decided to focus on vehicles, as this has extra supports, as they are all artifacts. One of the cards we included was the old Boros vehicle commander from Kaladesh, the Pala Pirate Exemplar. We are going to talk about it later. However, as you can see, this one you have to work a little bit harder to try to get some value out of your vehicles. Kolodin is fast and you get all of your attack triggers in no time. So let's begin. For creatures we have the Pala Pilot Exemplar, a Boros 3-mana 3/3 dwarf pilot that gives +1/+1 to your other dwarfs and your vehicles as long as they are creatures. Also, when tapped, you may pay X. If you do, reveal the top X cards of your library, put all dwarf and vehicle cards from among them into your hand, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This deck focuses on vehicles, however we do have some dwarfs as well. So the ability from this legendary is one of the sources we have of card advantage, and the other dwarfs are Gloin, Dwarf Emissary, giving us a treasure every time we cast a historic spell, and since the majority of the cards we have are either legendary or artifacts, Gloin will give us a lot of treasures just with his passive ability. Magda, Brazen Outlaw, is a card that needs no introduction, and in this deck the ability to break 5 treasures to tutor for an artifact and put it on the board is also fantastic for what our deck is trying to do. As when a vehicle gets into the battlefield, they will gain haste from our commander, and then they will be a creature until the end of turn, making Magda a great choice for this deck, even though the deck is not built around her. Srum, Senior Edificer, another great source of card advantage, if not the best in the deck. This is a 2-mana 2/2 Dwarf Advisor with the following texts. Whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. Draw in Boros is precious, so we must save it from harm at all costs. Our 2 last dwarfs are Gear Shift Ace and Veteran Motorists. Good cheap creatures that provide some synergy with vehicles, one giving +1/+1 to the vehicle it is crewing, and the other one first strike. For the rest of the creatures, we have 2 mana cost reducers in this case. Voyager Quick Welder and Foundry Inspector. Both cards are 3 mana with the texts. Artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. This is great as the majority of our artifacts are not that expensive. This way we can cast multiple per turn, gaining a lot of value and board presence at the same time. Canoptek Spider, a 40k card that sneaks into the deck as a great source of card draw. A 5-mana 4/4 artifact creature spider with Fabricator Claw Array. Whenever another non-token artifact creature or vehicle you control enters, draw a card. Again, card draw is very important in this color combination to avoid us to run out of gas, so cards like this are our includes. Lost Shield Clockwork Scholar also offers draw once per turn. However, our little 2/4 elephant also has prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking artifact creatures you control, meaning we can do some attacks that we would not normally do in fear of losing our creatures when attacking, putting our opponents in a bad situation, as we don't lose the creature but they most likely do. Astor, Bearer of Blades, a 4-mana 4/4 legendary human warrior with the following text. When Aster enters, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal an equipment or vehicle card from among them and put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. He also has equipments you control have equipped 1, and most important of all, vehicles you control have crew 1. This makes it so all our extensive crew abilities can be crewed by any of our creatures, even our commander. We are going to talk about this more when we are talking about vehicles. However, keep Aster in mind as he is one of the best creatures of the deck for sure. Alibu, Ancient Witness. Another great Boros artifact commander that also provides haste in case we lost our commander, and that also provides some extra damage in case we need it. The last creature we also want to talk about is Lita, Mechanical Engineer. A legendary 3/3 artificer with vigilance and, at the beginning of your end step, in-tap each other artifact creature you control. Create a 5/5 colorless vehicle artifact token named Zeppelin with flying and crew 3. This is super important as we can attack with our armada of vehicles and then untap them before our next turn, so we can crew them again in case someone wants to attack us. Remember, sometimes it is the threat of activation bigger than the activation itself, so by having the possibility of blocking with our ships, we'll most likely make our opponents think twice before sending their creatures our way. And now for sorceries we have Cut a Deal and Secret Rendezvous, both for some extra card draw and at the same time some political favors with our opponents. Start Your Engines. A 4-mana red sorcery with vehicles you control become artifact creatures until end of turn. Creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. In this deck, a card like this can provide enough power to do an alpha strike and kill at least 1 or 2 opponents in a turn. Organic Extinction. As a controlled, ideally one-sided board wipe, even though the 10 mana cost can look like a lot, don't forget you can use Improvise to reduce the mana cost of this card by tapping our vehicles and other artifacts we have around. Push the limit and Wake the Past. Do similar things, both are 7 mana and return the artifacts to the board, giving them haste until the end of turn. The big difference is that with Wake the Past, you will keep them on the board. Against all odds, we'll blink our vehicles and also maybe return other artifacts from the graveyard to the board, or even your commander if he was removed from the board. We didn't end up putting that many blink effects, but there is also a trick that you can do to avoid having to crew your vehicles, as when they enter the battlefield again, our commander will make them a creature until the end of turn. Even so, we believe blinking is also a good strategy for a deck like this, with Kolodin behind the wheel. For instance, we have Swords to Plowshares and Dispatch. For some cheap interaction spells, Dispatch will be a better version of Swords as long as we can activate its Metalcraft. Boros Charm. For protection, however, giving double strike to one of our big vehicles can also do a lot of damage out of nowhere. And Armed and Armored. For just 2 mana, turning all our vehicles into creatures can be game-changing for sure. So this was an auto-include, even though the card also has an ability regarding equipments that we are not going to use at all. For Planeswalkers, we only run 2. Dareti Scrap Savant. A classic red artifact Planeswalker for 4 mana and 3 loyalty and +2, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. -2, sacrifice an artifact. If you do, return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. -10, you get an emblem with, whenever an artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return that card to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. The combo of the +2 and then the -2 is a great boost you can add to the boards, discarding big vehicles and returning them to the board in exchange for small artifacts. This can change the board state out of nowhere. And the second Planeswalker we run is the new Chandra Spark Hunter. Another 4 mana Planeswalker, this time with 4 loyalty and the following text. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to 1 target vehicle you control. Until end of turn, it becomes an artifact creature and gains haste. +2, you may sacrifice an artifact or discard a card. If you do, draw a card. 0. created 3/2 colorless vehicle artifact token with crew 1. -7. You get an emblem with, whenever an artifact you control enters, this emblem deals 3 damage to any target. The passive ability was made for a deck like this, as well as the card advantage and the vehicle creation ability. To be honest, this was the first card we saw from the set and made us do the deck in the first place. Kolodin was just a perfect deck to add her. Enchantments we also run 2. Sweet Reconfiguration, a 1 mana aura with flash. Enchant creature or vehicle. Enchanted permanent is a vehicle artifact with crew 5 and it loses all other card types. This card can be used to crew with our opponent's creatures, but you can also use it on our own commander to keep it safe from some removal. The great strength for a deck like ours is that the vehicles are not creatures during our opponent's turns unless we want them to. So we end up dodging a lot of sorcery, speed removal by default, and this card is not only thematic, we can also turn our commander into a passive ability that is very hard to remove for some decks. Nahiri's Resolve is the other enchantment we have with creatures you control get +1/+0 and have haste. At the beginning of your end step, exile any number of non-token artifacts and/or creatures you control. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of your next upkeep. This card is not only another source of haste for our creatures, but also the possibility to untap the cards we attacked, allowing us to be aggressive and defensive at the same time. Now for this last section, let's talk about artifacts and vehicles. We are not going to talk about all of them, but if you want a full list, you can check the description down below the updated deck list. Aerial Survivor, a 3 mana flyer 3/4 that gets you a planes if the defending player controls more lands than you on the attack. Keep in mind that all the vehicles we are going to talk about, even if they don't look that impressive, remember that they are going to come to the board as creatures with haste with our commander, so the value that they offer is higher than usual. Conqueror's Galleon, a 4 mana 2/10 with crew 4 and, when this vehicle attacks, exile it at end of combat. Then return it to the battlefield, transformed under your control. On the other side, we have Conqueror's Foothold, a land with a lot of value. The fact that this can turn into a land the turn it comes to play with having to crew, it's fantastic, and an auto-include on this deck for sure. Even if it looks like we already have a lot of draw, it's never enough when playing Boros. Horde Howler, a 4 mana 5/5 with trample that, when it deals combat damage to a player, creates a treasure token for each artifact they control, to allow us to play more expensive vehicles. RMS Titanic, similar to the previous cards, another one that gives us treasures. In this case, this one can give us up to 7 treasures. Coming with haste into the board makes this card a lot better than usual. Imperial Recovery Unit, a 3 mana 3/4 with, whenever this vehicle attacks, return target creature or vehicle card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to your hands. May not look impressive, but when our opponents see the amount of value our commander gives us, they will most likely kill it a few times. So this is a good way to keep returning it, as Kolodin costs 2 mana. Sky Sovereign Consul Flagship, 5 mana for a 6/5 flyer that deals 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker as it enters or attacks. If you give it haste with our commander, that is 3 damage 2 times the same turn. A great card for sure. Smuggler's Copter, a card that was so good that was banned in Modern for quite some time. A cheap flyer that allows us to loot a card. Peace Walker Colossus, another way to cheat the crew costs and allow us to transform our vehicles into creature if we need it. Also, a 3 mana 6/6 is no joke. Weatherlight, another great flyer that offers card advantage. And as we have a total of 47 historic cards in our deck list, it's gonna hit almost every time. Parhelion 2 is one of the finishers of the deck. 8 mana 5/5 flyer with First Strike, Vigilance, Crew 4 and, whenever Parhelion 2 attacks, create 2 4/4 White Angel creature tokens with Flying and Vigilance that are attacking. This is one of those cards that benefits a lot from entering as a creature and having hastes. If you never played against these cards, then you are in for a treat, as this card is normally paired with Greasefang or Kiba Boss. And lastly, another finisher for this deck is Cybership, a 6-mana 8/8 flyer that creates 2/2 Cyberman artifact creatures when he hits our opponents. We hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and as always we would love to hear your opinion and what cards would you add to the deck. We are now on Patreon, so if you'd like to check it out, or the links are in the description below. See you soon!